So apparently people are just joining in. We don't have to let folks in. I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's discussion. My name is Dexter Wimberly. I'm a senior critic at New York Academy of Art. Today's panel discussion is about artist residencies. And unlike what we've done in the past, this is a discussion that is really focused on residencies that are taking place around the world. We have a fantastic group of panelists today, and in the interest of time, I'm going to jump right into it by introducing our first presenter. I will read each presenter's bio before they give a brief presentation about their residency, and then we'll go into a discussion. I have some questions that I'd like to ask each of them, but I'll save my questions until after everyone has had an opportunity to share a bit about the program that they are working on. So first up is Ruth Adams. Ruth is the co-executive director of Art Omi in Ghent, New York, where she provides leadership for the multi-faceted Contemporary Art Center's 120-acre sculpture and architecture park and gallery, 5 international artist residencies, arts events, and education programming, together with a board of trustees and program advisory boards totaling 90 people from the arts and business communities. Adams is dedicated to Art Omi's vitality and sustainability with a current focus on reputation building, destination creation, exemplary visitor services, internationalism, equity, inclusivity, and programming excellence. Adams has been in the arts residency field for 32 years and is always learning new ways to serve and support artists and community with one another in the unique setting of a residency. I want to thank Ruth for joining us today. I'm going to, as they say, yield the floor to you. You can share your screen at will, but also before you do that, if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes and introducing yourself, maybe a little less formally than a bio that I've just read.
Thank you so much, Dexter. And I'm just really pleased to be here with these esteemed colleagues in the same field. And I think this is a great place to talk about residencies. I think, so I've been in the residency field for 32 years and certainly in the nonprofit world. I think it's an incredibly important space. Art Omi is especially international and more, 30 years ago when Art Omi started, I came 20 years ago, it was still new to be international. Now I think it's, the art world is very international, as we know. But it's an important space. It's an important space for artists. And I look forward to talking about that more during question time.
Great, great. So feel free to share your screen and walk us through some more details about Art Omi.
All right. How come this always works better when you
Well, I would say just take your time. The thing about Zoom is that it always works best when you don't need it to, and when you need it to is when it doesn't work well.
There we
So
go.
so feel free to take your time to get that going.
Here we go.
Well, I see your calendars. You may need to stop share and then share again. It's just the quirkiness of the application.
Oh shoot. Oh, now I really messed it up.
Don't worry about it.
Let me see. Let me go into the calendar to get the thing.
In the meantime, I just want to remind everyone that's here, if you have questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to keep track of the questions in real time. But at the very least, I will get back to your questions before we conclude today's session. So I always want to remind people, don't wait until the very end to drop questions in because we will inevitably run out of time if you do that.
Am I sharing now?
Nope, but you can try again.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I'll try again. And how's that?
I think it's coming in now. Let's give it a moment. It says you've started screen sharing, so it should be jumping in now.
Oh, it says it's paused. Let me say resume. I wonder why. Oh, there we go. Not resuming?
Mm-mm.
Hmm. Duck. Darn. No.
What you could do, and again, just in the interest of time, if you want to go ahead and maybe email me that presentation, and I could maybe set it up on my end, and then just to kind of keep things going, what I might do
Start with somebody
is
else.
come back to you just so that
Okay,
we can
thanks.
keep the momentum going.
Sorry
So
about
send me
that.
your presentation, no problem. I mean, I always have issues with Zoom when I need it to work, and it works perfectly when I'm all alone, which doesn't really make an awful lot of sense. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce. I'm going to read the bios of our other two panelists just so that we're all grounded in who's present, and then I'll come back and try to grab Ruth's presentation and put it up on the screen. So we're also joined by Sarah Phillip, who is the Deputy Director of Delphina Foundation, the largest international visual arts residency program in the UK, where she focuses on partnerships, future strategy, and fundraising for the foundation's capital campaign. Prior to joining Delphina in June 2023, she was Director of Program and Policy at Art Fund, where she led on the development and delivery of the charity's grant programs, museum and gallery support, and sector policy and research. She worked with partners nationwide across the museum and visual arts sectors, laterally launching new research and funding to support the sector in its recovery from COVID-19. Sarah is a founding member of the Association of Women in the Arts and has advised organizations including Jerry Pompey, the King's Cross Knowledge Quarter, and the Church's Conservation Trust. Mentored for Arts Emergency and served as a trustee for the Association for Art History and Michael Clark Company. So I want to welcome you, Sarah, to today's conversation. We'll come back to you for your presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read Gabriella's bio and introduce her as well. So we have Gabriella Wilkes, who's the Program Director of BlackRock Global Arts Foundation. She has worked alongside world-renowned artist Kehinde Wiley since 2019 and is currently Programs Director of BlackRock Global Arts Foundation, the nonprofit founded by Wiley. She has produced international exhibitions and special projects for Wiley Studio, launched and developed the BlackRock Senegal Artist Residency Program, and successfully established 501c3 status for BRGAF. She has been integral in defining the growth and development of Wiley's non-for-profit work in the US and Africa, and has facilitated over 60 successful residencies for artists in Dakar, Senegal. She spearheaded the inaugural participation of BlackRock Senegal in the Dakar Art Biennial and secured ongoing exhibition partnerships for the residency with 154 Contemporary African Art Fair and the Harvey B. Ghent Center for African American Arts and Culture. So I want to go ahead and introduce Gabriella as well. So now that everyone has been introduced, I am going to go ahead and take 10 seconds and get Ruth's presentation up on my screen so that I can share it with you. And then you can all just simply tell me, Ruth, you can just tell me when to proceed and not proceed with each slide. So I have it ready. I think you should all be seeing it now, if I'm not mistaken. Do you all see it? Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is you just tell me, Ruth, when to proceed, and we'll just do it that way.
Okay, thanks so much, Dexter. So Art Omi this is a picture of the sculpture park. When you enter the institution, probably most of the people who enter the institution are the public who come to the exhibitions. You can change it, the slide. And I would say, briefly, we're a nonprofit. As said before, we're a sculpture and architecture park, which is unique as far as we know in the world. We don't know a place where architects get to come out and make a lab piece, an installation, which turns out to be really meaningful for them. Artists, of course, who are commissioned to make works, and we think of ourselves as a lab space. We also have a gallery, 5 distinct residency programs, which I'll talk about more, and an education program. Next.
Sure.
Mission, like everybody, you know, inspire and innovation and ignite change. Really, I think the thing we do best is create community throughout all our programs. We have a strong community ethic, and I think the internationalism, the cultural exchange is super important in the residencies, and I'll talk more about that next. So our residencies are 2/3 of the people in our residencies are international. Each residency comes separate from the others. So in other words, when the writers are here right now, just the writers, nobody else. When the writers leave, the architects come by themselves and so forth. I think this is a special, I've run interdisciplinary residencies, and I think this distinct model allows people to go really deep in their field and be surrounded by people in their field. Each program is led by somebody in their field, and also visitors, critics, gallery owners, publishers, agents come and interact with. So that's especially internationally important. And you've got, you know, how's a critic going to go see all these international artists? This is a great way to do it. It's free. You get all your meals. You get lovely space to live in. We've introduced modest stipends, which we hope to grow. We take people from all career stages, all ages. We purposely try to curate as diverse as possible in every way we can think of, every group. Next. That's how many artists, more than that, and a lot of countries. Next. Here's a little graphic. That's just in 2023. Just a nice graphic of who was here. 108 residents from 48 countries and new countries. Every year we've got new countries, and in 2023 it was Rwanda and Slovakia, so that was exciting. Next. Nice little representation of all of our residencies. We can go on to the next. So the studio barns, this is where it all started. 30 years ago, it was just a barn. And I wasn't here, but the founder and a handful of friends and supporters invited people from all over the world without the internet. It's kind of amazing that 30 people got here, and they lived in the houses of townspeople. It's not like that anymore, but the barn still stands and has been renovated and has always been. There's other buildings that aren't in sight. Here is about 4 buildings total for studios and about 4 houses up the hill. Next. Artists is the oldest program. It's 32 years old now. Used to be 30 artists that came together and shared rooms, bedrooms together. Since COVID, we don't share bedrooms anymore. So we're down to about 23 artists or 25. So always trying to figure out how to house more. And it's a very lively program, lots of interaction, visitors, like I said, professional visitors coming in the middle and having studio visits, and every residency has a culminating event. This one has an open studio. Next. As I said, each residency is run by somebody in their field. So Claudia Cannizzaro runs this residency, and really, she lives in Sicily, travels, sees artists all over, started at some point her own residency, which she and her husband aren't running currently, but I think their kids are their main residency now. But it's just really rich to have someone in your field making connections for you when you're running a residency, with administrative support from staff. But these people kind of come in, drop in, and run their residency, and then go back to where they live, and keep those relationships for a long time. Next. Architecture comes after the artists leave. There's 10 architects. This is our youngest program, maybe 7 or 8 years. It turns out architects really need time to think through things, projects. This is the only one that we ask for a proposal. So they may stick to their proposal and they may not, but they need time to kind of get out of the architecture world and just solve their own little problem quickly. And it's kind of amazing how meaningful this is for them. I'm learning a lot coming from the visual world and visual arts world. I'm learning a lot about the architecture world and how it serves them to have a residency. Next. And the residency director for this is a Dutch woman living in New York, Julia Vandenhout, who does amazing work and also has her own architectural studio in which she does a lot of publications, internationally engaging in conversations about art and architecture. And she also curates, by the way, our sculpture, the part of the sculpture park for architects. Next. Dance comes after architecture. Dance and music are special in that they are each, first music was the second residency, I think, or third that we had. And they were collaborative and improvisational. So they're chosen as a group, sort of curated to be the most oddly put together group you can imagine. Like not all trumpets, obviously, but all kinds of traditional and non-traditional instruments and things. And then dance was founded on that same principle. So they come together from all over the world, all kinds of dance backgrounds. They collaborate and improvise. So they're not making a product. It's all about process. Again, we think this is unique. We haven't heard about it. I think it's become more known since we started. Next. And there is a public event at the end, or they share works that they've done, and sort of that are still in process. Our residency director for this program, Christopher Morgan, is just astounding facilitator, and runs his own nonprofit now in San Diego, and was doing that in Hawaii before that. This is just a really exciting residency, again, because there's nothing like it in the dance world. They really appreciate getting to kind of bust out of their traditional product-oriented frame of mind. Next. Similar to music, same thing. Next. And this is the music director will be next, Jeffrey Leppendorf, who is also in the literary world. And so it's nice to have that crossover, but he's here in Hudson and near us. Is a very active musician, and it's an extraordinary residency, again, that collaborates, improvises, busts out of all the roles they're used to having. And both these collaborative residencies result in partnerships that go on sometimes for decades and certainly years. Next. The writers who are here now, they do this is a picture of them doing a reading in our visitor center. And they do a public event, they do a reading and share in their own language and in English, just a short excerpt of their work. They really are sort of the most traditional residency in that they come, they're in their bedroom and they have another bedroom as their studio, and they are write in solitude as writers do. So they're not down in our barn, but they have wonderful interaction, and they have agents and other writers and publishers come on the weekends, which is a rich experience for them as well. Next. We also do a translation lab, which is very unusual in the world as far as we know, where a translator and a writer will apply together. This is D.W. Gibson, the amazing director for that program, who lives in Hawaii and comes here at the start of each cohort. He comes, they're month-long cohorts, and he'll come for the first week and then be with them by Zoom. Next. Sculpture and Architecture Park, I talked a little bit about. It's about 60 pieces right now. It's very kind of a place you wander and have experiences unexpected, with a gallery and a visitor center. Next. Just a few pieces that went into the architecture portion of the park in 2023. Next. Pippa Garner, huge show for us in the gallery last year, got us a lot of attention. Pippa is, she's an amazing artist in her 80s, and she's got an amazing show at the Whitney Biennial. If she's in the Biennial, it's a few other artists that we work with. So please stop by and see that. Next. That was her truck. Just another Will Ryman's Pack Lab, another fun thing in the park. Next. Bianca Beck, that was a commission. That was her first outdoor piece that she did for us. Next. Alexander Arashea, Orange Functional, really super fun. Next. I think I've said, this exhibition program is sort of a lab space. We do a lot of commissions. We have brought finished works as well. And this talks about the gallery, but we can move on. Some photos of recent shows. The last one, Dion's, was sound education, great, very robust program. No, you can go on, Dexter. Robust program of education. We do a lot of work in the schools. We have some summer camps in the park. It's pretty amazing. Next. Kids making art. Next. That's it.
Well, thanks for that. Really helpful. Really gave us a deep dive. I visited on my several years ago. I was actually a visiting visiting curator, and I did a bunch of studio visits. So I can attest to the beauty of the location, and it's a great vibe being there. So I'm really excited that you're participating today, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. If not today, certainly shortly thereafter, that people have about the program there. So next up will be Sarah. Now, similar to Ruth, Sarah sent me her presentation. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and then I am going to take, and so since I gave a brief sort of more formal biography of you, maybe you can just take a moment and just share a little bit about yourself while I get your slideshow ready to go.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm Deputy Director at Delphina Foundation in London. I've been at the foundation since last summer. And it's my first job working in the artist residency space. So I'm learning kind of tons all the time about the variety of residencies that there are out there and what artists need at different moments in their career. Yeah, it's great to be here and hear from my fellow speakers.
Thank you. So I am downloading your presentation to take
Sorry,
all
it's
of
huge. I'm really sorry. I don't know why I couldn't make it any smaller.
No. It should take all of like 10 seconds. I'm sure it's just gonna be a moment. So
it's because I stole
but
the images from our like comms manager. So they're really like high res public.
Well, I'll fill the time by saying that similar to having had the opportunity to visit Art Omi some years ago, I also I met Sarah last year in London. I was participating in a curatorial residency with Hauser and Wirth Gallery, and it just so happens that your foundation was on our list of places to visit while we were in London. So it all kind of works out with a lot of serendipity, as they say. So I do have your presentation up on my screen.
Let's go.
I'm going to attempt to do a screen share. And as usual, we just hope for the best. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen. Okay, great. So let me put this into full screen mode. I know it's always tricky when you try something new. Is it still there?
It's still there. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll advance to the next slide just to make sure it's working.
Great. That's working. Okay. So I'll just go for it.
Sure.
So Delphina Foundation, we are based in the centre of London. So this is us, this is our building. The front door is on the left of my screen and the back door is on the right. It's two houses. In between Victoria train station, which for those of you that don't know is one of the biggest kind of national train stations in London, and Buckingham Palace. So round out the back of our building, about 100 meters down the road is Buckingham Palace. So it's a really fantastic location. It's an unusual location. Not a lot of people live in this part of London. But we talk about it as putting artists right at the centre of the city rather than on the margins. So it has a very kind of particular character as as a residency, and the kind of idea of being right next to Buckingham Palace is a really interesting one as well, right next to kind of the seat of power, this symbolic building and its connections to history, and particularly to the history of empire. And because we are an international residency space, a lot of our artists come to us with from places in the world that have a particular relationship to empire. And quite often their work is also looking at some of these questions too. So it's a really kind of rich location, and it's just a really fun place as well. So next slide. Okay, so who we are. We are the UK's largest international residency programme. We were founded by actually a Spanish philanthropist called Delfina Canales, who is famous for saying that she collected artists, not art. And I think that kind of philosophy is really very much at the heart of both the foundation and the predecessor organisation, Delfina Studios, which provided affordable studio space for UK-based artists and ran until the mid 2000s. And today, the foundation, which began its work in 2007, and the studios have between them supported over 1,000 artists. We've had quite a lot of success as well. Like, our artists have gone on, we've got Golden Lion winners, Turner Prize winners. We've got over a dozen artists showing as part of the Venice Biennale this year. We're really super proud of our alumni. And one of the things that we're really proud of is that we have a kind of alumni community. We keep in really close touch with the majority of the artists that have been through the studios and the foundation. And it's just a really rich network for the residents that we have and the residents to come. So what we do now is we offer residencies at our building in London to 40 international artists every year. We provide private residency space for 8 artists at a time. So at any one time, there are 8 artists and 8 members of staff all sharing the building. And we have a small, flexible gallery space, which is open to the public. When we have a show on, it's open 7 days a week, free of charge. And then we've also got some small but flexible event spaces in the building as well. So it's a very flexible mixed-use space. At a time when opportunities for mobility and cultural exchange are kind of increasingly limited and precarious, we have a founding commitment to provide access and a platform for artists from underrepresented geographies and communities in particular. That's extremely important to us and was part of the reason that we were set up in the first place. And so far, the numbers are not quite as good as you, Ruth, but we're getting there. We've hosted residents from 92 countries, and 70% of those are from global majority regions and diaspora communities. We really believe in cultural exchange. It's right at the heart of what we do. And it's very unusual for the 8 artists that we have on site to not be from 8 different countries. So we've normally got a very, very diverse group of artists, and it's one of the kind of enormous privileges of working for the foundation. Next slide, please. So what are we? So and what kind of does our residency program look like? So we would describe ourselves and our as an incubator. So one of the kind of principal aspects of the residency is that it's process and research led. So we don't offer studio space. Each artist has their own bedroom, and a lot of them make work in their room. So, for example, Benelde here turned his bedroom into a little studio. And we can get off-site studio space if artists need it, but that's not the focus of the residency. There's no expectation on them to make. And there's no focus at all on production. So it's very much about providing artists with time and space to think, to reflect. We encourage artists to use kind of the resources that London has to offer, such as libraries and archives. And we will support them to access those if that's what they want to do while they're here. But equally, and as we say to every artist when they arrive, like, you can do nothing. because actually, like, you know, artists, like everybody else, need time and space to think and to reflect on their practice. And that's what we provide. And that is the kind of the fundamental character of our residency. Next slide. The other aspect of a Delphina residency is we are a connector. It's a very social residency. So kind of quite literally, because you're sharing a space with 8 other people, you're sharing a kitchen with 7 other people, and then all of the staff, you're sharing a kitchen, you know, you're seeing everyone in their pajamas in the morning. So you're getting to know your fellow residents and, you know, normally making friends with them. There are a million WhatsApp groups out there of former residents. But then the other kind of aspect of what we do as a team and as a residency space is a lot of professional development and support for kind of professional development in terms of networks and relationship building for our artist residents. So you will kind of get to know your residents and other artists through a group program. Each residency season has a group program. But then you'll also each artist is also meeting with curators, with collectors, with gallerists, with other artists through their own individual programs of kind of professional development. And we have a residency curator as part of our team who works in depth with every single resident to kind of support them, studio visits, crit sessions, all sorts of kind of individualized opportunities for them. And then kind of beyond that, we are quite social in terms of the events that we put on. The foundation is a not-for-profit. We have to raise all our money every year to kind of provide this residency program. And so we have lunches, we have talks and events that we kind of invite supporters, curators, art world colleagues and friends to, and they're also a part of our residence experience. And quite often we will kind of ask our residents to just sort of stand up, introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their practice. It's very relaxed. It's very low stress, but we try and kind of create a community kind of all the time while they're here. And that's really a kind of critical part of this program. So you don't come to Delphina if you want to be in nature. You come and kind of, you know, spend sort of time meditating. Like, there are some beautiful residencies that offer that, and I'd love to do those, but that's not a Delphina residency. Next. So the other thing we are is we're a platform. So we present new artists, new art and new ideas to local and global audiences. As I said, we've got our gallery space, and that we have a program where we normally have about 3 exhibitions a year. They're normally solo shows by former residents, and they're usually either the first European or UK show by that artist. And it's a way for us to continue to provide support for our residents post the residency. And it's also kind of a really important part of our public programme and the kind of work we do in relationships we have with, for example, art schools in London. So we have that, and that's free and open to the public. But the artists, when they're in residence, are also, if they want to, able to hold workshops. Those can be public workshops or private workshops. If the kind of group of artists in a particular season wants to do a kind of, you know, open studio style event, they take over the house basically, and they show kind of their research in progress. And we have an open day and people come and they're really fun, or we might do a performance evening, but we don't expect those to happen. It's all very much artist-led, which is great because it means like we can be really flexible, and our events are kind of like always quite fun, like a little bit DIY. But it also means our programming happens in like a month, you know, in like the turnaround is a month. So yeah, we're always scrabbling. But it does make for a really kind of exciting atmosphere. And again, there's no like expectation that you have to you have to join in. So like we might have an open studios and 6 of the 8 artists will show something. And that's cool. Like that's completely fine. Each residency is unique. Next slide. And last, but certainly not least, and perhaps most importantly, we're a home. So as I said, you know, I come in the morning and like the residents are like in the kitchen in their pajamas eating breakfast. And it's really important, like, because of the artists that we bring to London, like often they've not been to Europe before, it's their first time, they've never been to London before. English is very rarely their first language, so they need to feel at home. Like they're here for between 6 weeks and 3 months. And they've got to feel safe, it's got to be comfortable, you know, this needs to feel like home for them. So everything starts kind of in the kitchen for us. We do a lot of eating together. And I think it's what gives this place like its really great atmosphere, actually. Next slide. So how it works. So how do we do this? Well, we kind of accept what we kind of broadly would call visual artists, but like, you know, this is like visual arts in its widest sense. So we have performance artists, sound artists, artists who are working with algorithms and coding and programming, like it's not, and then we also have painters. But it's very kind of multi and interdisciplinary. We also have curators and art writers as well sometimes. And in any one season, there'll be artists working with a variety of kind of media and who have like different research interests. So there's a lot of kind of cross-fertilization and kind of encouragement of like conversation between the residents as well. We select through a mix of nomination and open call. Because of principally how our funding works, many residencies are kind of country or region specific. And we very occasionally have international open calls. Most often when we run thematic seasons, which is where we have a kind of very broad theme and we bring artists together kind of under the umbrella of that theme. So one of our themes is performance as process, another is collecting as practice. We've got a very long running theme, which some people might have heard of, called the politics of food. And then there are more likely to be international open calls, but we don't have them very often. There's a kind of fairly light touch application and interview process. And then the team here makes the selection of artists. As I said, we've got to raise all our money every year. And so we have a kind of real mix of funders. We have individual donors, we have international foundations, embassies and cultural bodies, and then we've got our own networks of donors and supporters, and some of those networks are region specific and enable us to work with artists from different countries around the world, maybe that we haven't reached before. So our funding covers flights, visas, travel expenses. Basically, kind of the idea is that no artist who comes here should be out of pocket. They're not paying for anything while they're here. Unfortunately, we don't pay any kind of stipend, but we do offer quite generous living expenses and research allowance while artists are in residence. So so they shouldn't, they shouldn't be out of pocket. We pay for everything. And then what are we looking for? So we are looking for artists at key moment in their careers. So we don't say you need to be early career, you need to be mid-career, you know, it's about what this residency will do for you at this point in your practice. And bearing in mind that, you know, it's a research-led residency, it is a very social residency. It's like, what are you going to get out of being here and participating in this residency program? And that's really the thing that we ask on our application form as well, like, why London, why Delphina, why now? Yeah, so that I think is it for me. So the way to find out more, so one more slide, I think. Well, anyway, the last slide was go to our website, sign up to our mailing list. All our open calls are will be announced there, and then also on our Instagram, obviously, because that's where I find out about everything these days.
Got it.
There
Okay,
you
well,
go.
sorry for the premature, but of course, everyone can just kind of search out your site and get that info.
Just search Delphina Foundation, you'll find us, yeah. And it's Delphina with an F.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to Gabriella, whose bio I also read. You should unmute yourself, Gabriella. And I think you're going to do your own screen share, if I'm not mistaken, Gabriella.
Yes, I'll see how this goes.
Great.
That's the plan.
Let's see how it goes. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, great. So as Dexter mentioned, my name is Gabriella and I'm the programs director for BlackRock Global Arts Foundation. And I work really closely on the residency program BlackRock Senegal, which is kind of the core of the presentation I'm going to give today, is providing some more information about that. So I will start my screen. Okay. Everyone can see that okay? Perfect. So as I mentioned, we're an artist residency program. We were founded by the artist Kehinde Wiley in 2019. And a fun fact about this image that's on the screen now is kind of that black obscure building in the background is our compound. So you can see it's right on the water and right kind of has its own private kind of beach access. And we have a lot of fishing trips and ocean adventures as well as part of our program. So BlackRock Global Arts Foundation, we were started as Kehinde's kind of non-for-profit work, and primarily we're really an organization that seeks to support programs like artist residencies, specifically in Africa, really connect and support artists to opportunities to live and create work, primarily in Africa, but kind of internationally as well. And we work really closely kind of on a range of partnerships and programming, really focused on the artist experience and intention of really supporting their time in creation and experimentation. BlackRock Senegal was named for the volcanic rocks that are on its shoreline. Kehinde discovered kind of Senegal when he was en route to Nigeria on a layover and really fell in love with the environment. And initially he was creating his own kind of studio space and then decided that he really wanted to share this experience with other artists and found that specifically for artistic creation and energies that he was connecting to locally, he wanted to bring that to a kind of the world stage. So we accept 14 to 16 artists each year, and they attend in cohorts of 3. So it's a very intimate program in terms of kind of the space that you're sharing with people. You do have kind of 3 private studio spaces and 3 private living spaces, but you share meals together, you share kind of any kind of programming that we have. So it's very collaborative, but there's also kind of the space to have your individual time and kind of dedication. The residencies range from 1 to 3 months, so depending on both the artist's availability and their other existing projects throughout the year, and then whatever projects they're interested in developing while in residency, we'll kind of work with them to determine the best kind of part of the calendar for them to join us. So far, we've hosted over 60 artists from 17 countries. So again, we are slightly smaller than my other awesome programs that we've heard about today. And we accept multidisciplinary artists from different mediums, painters, sculptors, textile makers, mixed media, time-based performance. So it's a real range. We received over 2,000 applications from 70 countries this kind of most recent application cycle, which we were very excited about. And we have a very robust local team, and we have over kind of 30 jobs that we've now created in Senegal. Our artist experience, as I mentioned, is really core to our program. We have a dedicated team that's on site to really support each artist's time in residency. We work with each of them to develop a program that's in line with their projects and their goals. For some, that is really dedicated studio time, and they really want to be working on their next upcoming show. And for others, they have a list of collaborators and people that they want to connect with in Senegal. And we really make sure that those connections are forged and supported throughout their time with us. As I mentioned, we have, each of our residents has a private apartment and studio space. We also provide, 3 freshly cooked meals each day. The residents have access to a gym, a sauna, an infinity pool. as well as the beach. So Ghent was very intentional about providing kind of a luxurious and restful experience for artists to really support their creative intention as well. So for a lot of our artists, it's a really unique time to get to really focus solely on their artistic practice and kind of alleviate the pressures of daily life. We also provide a production stipend at the start of each residency, which can often support, purchasing local materials or attending local trips. We also provide language tutors in English, French, and Wolof to help navigate the city. And we also include kind of a professionally documented studio visit. So that includes a video kind of interview as well as professional headshots. And that is really useful for a lot of our artists for their future kind of professional development. So as I mentioned, we are very intentional about connecting with our local community, and our dedicated staff really works with our artists to define what that looks like for each of them. A few kind of interesting examples: Usman, who is a Tokyo-based artist, was working specifically with artisans in Makadiyama to learn more about their papyrus paper making process with local taifa fibers, which is a very unique process to Senegal. And together he was kind of bringing his understanding of Japanese paper making to kind of the Senegalese technique. And there was a really interesting kind of collaboration and communication happening between those two groups. Ambrose, who was another artist who joined us, was really interested in the textile markets and sourcing materials to incorporate in her kind of larger scale pieces. And you can see on this map some kind of key areas where we really encourage artists to visit if they are interested. We really like to look at archives. We like to kind of focus on textile and ceramic artisans and artists that are in Senegal, and also kind of visit important cultural sites such as Gorée Island. What else? So we have a pretty robust programming schedule as well. We really take our program as an invitation to kind of discover and interact with the vibrant artistic community in Senegal and really forge connections with both local Senegalese artists and abroad. We really facilitate a lot of kind of open studios if that's of interest for each of the artists. We really try to connect them with kind of local weavers and dyers and metal workers, really learning about Senegal through both those artists' practice and then also kind of touring national heritage sites. We also kind of host our own public programming, which includes live performances, open air film screenings, and workshops that are open to the public. And usually those events are kind of centered around our activations around the Biennale in Dakar or around our application cycles to really kind of share information about what we're doing.
Awesome.
Application process, thank you. As each year, we have an open call. So it's open to international artists of any discipline. We ask them to kind of self-identify whichever medium selection that we have that best fits with their application. And you're welcome to apply as long as kind of you're over at the age of 18. So it's very open. We have an online platform that we work with, Pictor, and we require a CV, a cover letter, and then a portfolio. And the portfolio is primarily kind of images of artwork and kind of a short, brief explanation of the artwork that you're included. In the cover letter specifically, we're really looking for artists who are interested specifically in Senegal, in Dakar, who really have a project that's based on the kind of work that we're really invested in supporting. And that always kind of really helps to make a compelling application for our selection committee. As I mentioned, we accept 14 to 16 artists each year, and each new class is selected by a selection committee of kind of artists and creators, curators, gallerists. It really ranges. And it also rotates each year. So we kind of get a very dynamic class each time, dependent on kind of our selection committee and kind of the different disciplines that they're drawing from.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. We also have a robust kind of alumni network and programming series that we're really working on developing now that we've kind of gotten we're well kind of established now since our opening. We kind of have had now over 4 classes and over 60 artists. So we do have kind of a robust alumni network that have gone on to do some really incredible things. Every 2 years, we participate in the Jakarta Biennale, which features an alumni exhibition and a month-long programming series. And our inaugural participation was in 2022, and that included over 80 artworks and 40 artists that drew on both alumni as well as the local artists in Senegal that really formed and collaborated with a lot of their practices. And alongside the alumni show, we'll kind of host live performances. We'll do kind of a large opening event, which will kind of have headliners and local vendors. And then we'll also throughout the month hold workshops and live programs and things like that that really are primarily for our artists and our alumni to engage with the local community. In 2022, we hosted that at the Judah Sec Cultural Center. And in 2024, which is right around the corner next month, we're going to be hosting another iteration at Blaise Senghor Cultural Center. So we also really look to engage with centers within Dakar that we can really invest in for this programming. We often kind of do some kind of renovation of the space to really support it both for our project and beyond. So that's something that can be used by other arts organizations in Dakar. We also have a 2-year partnership now with 154 Contemporary Art Fair. So we're going to have an iteration, kind of a special project with them in Morocco, New York, and London. And we will share kind of an exhibition of alumni work. And we will also have kind of a coalition building symposium that we're hosting in Morocco for those iterations. So that's really looking to bring together other artist residencies and kind of artist-run foundations to really come together and kind of discuss the state of affairs in Africa specifically. And then we also have the Harvey B. Ghent project that's opening in August, which we're very excited about. That's also a multi-year partnership that's really focused on alumni exhibitions and kind of showcasing the breadth of our programs participants. And we're hoping to kind of continue collaborations, continue building partnerships with really the focus of providing a platform that extends past their residency into kind of different international landscapes for our alumni. And we have some exciting 2024 calendar events that are upcoming. As I touched on, we have, of course, we have 154 New York, that's also right around the corner. And then we quickly followed by the Jakarta Biennial. All of these are kind of open programs. Same with the Harvey B. Ghent. We'll then be in London, and then our application. Yeah, so super exciting. We'll be in your hometown. And then we'll be in November opening our next application cycle. So for any interested artists that are interested in applying, that's kind of the general sense of when that's going to open next. We're also soon expanding into Nigeria. So we're opening up a new residency campus, which is going to be even larger and really designed to support practices that require certain kind of technical equipment, like music, like film production. Our Senegal campus is quite, it's very flexible, but it is quite geared towards kind of visual artists. And we're hoping that this next campus will be a really supportive environment for artists that really kind of are seeking those extra supports. So that is hopefully in 2025, which we're very excited about. And I've included our contact details at the bottom, which gives you more information about our email, Instagram, and website. If you have any questions about our program or our application cycles, that email address is the best way to reach one of our team. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you all for giving such thorough overviews of your programs. I think that even though one can go on your website and read a lot of this information, it's always helpful to hear from the human beings who are involved in these programs. And so there were a couple of questions that came in, and I think I want to just kind of cut to one that I've heard many times. I mean, I don't know if it's a known thing by everyone here, but I also run an artist residency in Japan. So I'm very sensitive to the realities of the responsibility on all of your shoulders. So one of the questions that came in was, what are you looking for in applicants as it relates to their academic background? I think that that's something that I often hear. Is there anything that you can share about the relevance of, say, an MFA, the relevance of an extensive exhibition history, the relevance of, I mean, you get where I'm going. I mean, often artists, and we'll say for the sake of this question, visual artist, and I guess it can work with, this kind of applies to other disciplines as well, are very concerned about how seasoned do they need to be. So I have each of you, if you can just take literally 30 seconds to just give me your opinion on that. And we'll start from the beginning. We'll start with Ruth, then we'll go to Sarah, then we'll go to Gabriella.
Sure, good question. We really judge by the individual work. So education, there's not a required education level. We just look for some evidence of an ongoing practice. And we do say we don't take people 3 years out of school. So the idea is you take 3 years, establish that you're actually committed to a practice, and that's enough.
That's a very important point to make, because that would then allow people who are considering Art Omi to really evaluate themselves and say, look, I just graduated last year. Maybe it's too soon for me to apply for this residency. So that's a good criteria for people to kind of understand and go on. And Sarah, how about you?
I mean, I would say it's similar. Like we do get applications sometimes from artists, young artists who maybe are just like out of grad school or maybe still doing their MFA. But we don't accept them. We require some evidence of an ongoing practice, and it's normally sort of at least 3 years, although we have taken artists with less. If the kind of the evidence of that sort of ongoing practice is sufficiently kind of extensive. We don't always, I would say also, like, not all of the artist residents who come here have been to art school. Like, some of their practice is self-initiated. They've studied other things. They've studied politics, or they've studied choreography, or they've studied, you know, then they haven't come up necessarily through a traditional art school route. A lot of them have, like, honestly, but by no means all of them.
Thank you. And Gabriella, how about you?
Yeah, I think it really ranges for us. As I mentioned,
You're breaking up a bit. I don't know if that's just on my end or not.
Application criteria. We do tend to get out of just starting this. Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you better now. You were breaking up a bit, but if you could
Okay.
repeat that would be great.
I'll repeat that, no worries. So I was just saying that it really ranges for us. We do accept emerging artists who are very new to their practice. And again, I think, as Sarah mentioned, kind of artists who don't necessarily come from a traditional academic background. They may be self-taught. They may have had kind of a previous or, you know, tangential career. So we really do look at the kind of breadth of their application. I won't say that it's not a factor. I think we definitely look at a CV. We look at kind of what kind of exhibitions, whether it's group shows, solo exhibitions, really looking for kind of a dedication to their practice in some form. But many of our artists will maybe need this space to build a larger portfolio for an application for graduate programs or something like that. And I think, like, we are very intentional about looking at the quality of artwork, and their mission and their project based, I think, was, like, really for us the main component of do they want to come to this residency just because it's the residency, or do they really want to come to Black Rock, Senegal because of, you know, X, Y, and Z criteria that fits within their practice? And is this going to support them?
No, that's
to meet one of their goals.
Incredibly helpful. I think that it's been my experience that people who apply for residencies are also curious about how, and you kind of mentioned this, how much of the decision is just purely their creative output, and how much of the decision has to do with other factors. And it's a difficult question to answer, of course, because every artist, or every creative person rather, is different, because some of you are also bringing in dancers and choreographers and other sort of disciplines. So certainly, you know, everyone's unique, but is that something you could speak to a little bit? I mean, and again, it's kind of an odd question because I've already said that it's a difficult one to answer, but in your opinion, I mean, just knowing what you know about your program, is it the creative work that matters the most? I guess that's the question.
I get that. I think so this is what I wish I'd said during my presentation. I think that the residency space, and I've been around for a while on the planet, and I witnessed the dismantling of arts funding in the United States in 1989, especially in the few years after. I think that the residency space is really the third space now, so school, professional, residencies, hugely expanded since I started. I mean, by more than tenfold. So residencies are important. It's a way to build community. Sure, way to make work. Yeah, but building community, getting exposure to professionals, new places, new experiences, new ideas, exchange. All of that is what matters. And I think, if there's a way to think about that before you apply to a residency, to really think about, what do I want to get out of this? It's a really important space, and it's never been more organized. The Alliance for Artist Communities is an incredible resource to find where to apply and where you fit and what will serve you best. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. Anyone else would like to share some thoughts on that?
I think that's completely right. I would also say from our perspective, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, like the creative work is the most important thing, and all kind of residency spaces have, I think, in the same way, have a kind of particular focus or a particular kind of, set of interests around kind of creative practice. And you can tell that from the kind of lists of former residents, But I would say at Delphina, like, it's also important what is that individual going to get out of a residency here? And there may be two artists that we think are kind of equally kind of interesting in different ways, but the one that we'll pick is the one that we think is going to get the most out of the program, for sure. And I would also say, because we have 8 artists at a time and they're living in really close proximity, and there's a group program, there's also and we don't always get this right, but there's a certain alchemy, how is that group going to work together? And quite often, we'll offer to an artist because we think that artist is going to really work with that group dynamic. And there might be another artist who we really like, who we think probably isn't going to get as much out of that particular group dynamic, but we might well go back to that artist for a later season. We do kind of have a sort of list of artists that we've shortlisted that we haven't offered a residency to for one reason or another. And we will quite often go back to them if we think that there's a better opportunity for them with us.
Yeah, so there's a certain amount of I'm trying to find the right word. I could say strategy, but it's not really the right word. It's actually more of a sort of alchemy. And you may have mentioned
I've come down to that word because and it's not it's not scientific, and we don't always get it right, but that's what we're looking at. That's what we're kind of working with, for sure.
And Gabriella, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very well said by both Ruth and Sarah. I think and slightly what I mentioned earlier of both the artistic practice, of course, the creative work that they're submitting to us. I've definitely, on that note, seen a application, for example, that has a really incredible cover letter, but they didn't really submit their strongest work, and that was really surprising. And sometimes we'll see them apply next year, and they'll have gotten that perfect match in their application of really getting the pieces of their application to speak as a whole, so that we're looking at one application that's really dynamic. And then similarly, we're really looking at something that kind of meets a variety of criteria. We are very focused always on the creative output, but we're also looking at the combination of the other people in the class that we're putting together, their intentions behind why they want to do our residency, making sure that it's specifically tailored to our program and what we can provide and how we can support their practice. So it really is kind of a balancing act, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you. So two things I want to say. One is, so we're about 4 minutes after the hour, and I know this was scheduled to be 1 hour, but as it always does, the good questions start coming in at the end. So I would just want to ask if you can each just give me maybe 5 more minutes of your time before we call it a day. The other thing is I want to say to the attendees, we have 2 questions queued up. We probably have time for 2 more. So whoever gets those 2 more questions in, that's kind of probably going to be it for the day. And so the first question I want to get to is, and this is a great one because I hear this all the time. Regardless of your own residency's realities and program goals, how do you approach the issue of parent artists? I see that there are just a few programs that are open to parents accompanied by children. So we have more programs devoted to parent artists accompanied by kids. So now I asked that question. I'm also going to like answer that question, at least from my perspective. So 4 years ago, I started an artist residency in Japan. And I'm constantly asked about whether or not an artist who has a child or children, if they can accompany them. So my answer is no, because the residency that I've started is set up specifically for individual artists to spend time on their own, or if they choose to spend time with the other artists in residence. However, as a parent, I'm incredibly sensitive to and also excited about the idea of adding a component to my residency sometime in the future that would allow for artists or creative individuals who are parents to somehow incorporate that into their experience. I do know that there are some residencies that are specifically dedicated to artists that are parents. So I would just say to the person who asked that question, I would think that 9 times out of 10, you will not be able to bring your child to a residency. That's probably like 9 times out of 10. However, there is a growing movement of residencies that are dedicated to creatives or artists that are parents. And I, for one, am trying to incorporate that into the program that I'm doing. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or comments on that, if you've heard that question before, but I at least wanted to put my 2 cents in there. Guess there are no comments.
I mean,
So,
I would just say what you said, and as a parent, I think it can be really valuable to get away from the kids and shopping and cooking. But also I get that there are people who can only come if they bring their kid, and there are definitely spaces where you can do that.
yeah. And something I'll add to that as well is that, and this wasn't brought up, but I do think it's something worth mentioning, and maybe someone has an opinion on this. Because I believe, Gabriella, you said your residency was flexible. It is a certain time, up to a certain time. I don't know if Omi is a set time, and I don't know if Delphina is a set time, or is it flexible, the time frame? So for each of you, if you can just quickly answer that, is it set or is it flexible? When the artist applies, do they have to be there for, say, 6 weeks, or is it like you get to be there from 6 weeks to 3 months, that kind of thing?
That come the same day, leave the same day.
Okay, got it. For Delphina, is it set?
Sorry, I've got a terrible internet connection, but I think you were asking me, is it set 6 weeks to 3 months? Or so
Is it a time frame or is it flexible?
like we can't it's a bit flexible. And what we have done in the past is, rather than offering 1 3-month residency, we've offered 2 6-week residencies, for example. So we've taken 2 artists for less time. It's always a discussion we're happy to have, for sure. But like, we also think that you don't get so much out of a shorter residency, because there's a lot of there's this kind of individualized program, and that can take a little while to kind of develop and to gather momentum. And so if you're just here for kind of a month, you're not going to get as much out of it as if you're here for 2 months or 3 months. So you kind of need to think about that. But yeah, totally, always a conversation that we can have. Absolutely.
The reason I asked that is because I'm often asked, as it relates to the residency I started, which is only a month, I'm often asked, why not make it longer? And my response to that has always been, in the short time that I've been doing this, is that it will eventually be longer. But one thing to keep in mind is that the longer the residency, you actually start reshaping the demographics of who can actually attend. Because the reality is that for some people,
3 months is amazing. It's awesome. I'd love to be away for 3 months. But for a large percentage of the creative population, getting away from where they live for 3 months is a sheer impossibility. So I'm also sort of thinking through that, because when you mandate 3 months, you basically, you know that there has to be a certain sort of life phase or life state of the person who can actually be out of their country for 3 months. And typically, to the earlier point, it isn't going to be someone with a 1-year-old, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
more
Yeah, I
often
mean,
than
like
not, right?
you're totally right. And like we've done things like we've split residencies. So we had an artist a couple of seasons ago who had a young child, and she came for 2 6-week blocks, which worked for her. We've had an artist with a young child who she was fortunate enough to have family living in London, and she brought her child, and they stayed off site, and like she made it work. Not everyone can do that, but like I think you've got to be realistic about your circumstances. But we can talk about like different lengths of time for residencies. That's a possibility for sure. You have a different experience.
No, for sure, for
But
sure.
but like it's we're always happy to talk about options.
So
Absolutely.
two more final questions unrelated to what we were just talking about. One of those questions is, you mentioned looking at applications and considering artists that can get the most out of the experience. So it's an interesting thing to consider if you're applying for a residency. Like, how do you, again, tough question, I know. How do you articulate that? And again, you're not being prescriptive. I'm not asking you for the language that someone should use. I'm just trying to get my head around, because someone asked this question, sort of like, is it demonstrating need, or is it demonstrating what you can bring to the experience? Or is it a combination of the two? It's a tough question, I know.
I don't think it's need.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's about opportunity.
Okay.
And I also think like for us, it's like, okay, so it's process based. There's no expectation on you to produce anything. Like, so do you just need time to like think and reflect, and like why? Explain why you need that time. Like, you're interested in X, Y, or Z, and you know that there are archives here. Like, tell us that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you wanna like you live somewhere, I don't know where you live, but the arts ecosystem where you are is quite young. Like, you want to come to London, you want to make net connections, you want to talk about like where you come from, you want to like build those relationships and those international networks. Tell us that.
Right.
Like, there's kind of there's like there's 3 or 4 things that you'll get coming to us.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to like check all of those boxes, but like, what's the opportunity for you?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's like, actually, I really just want to sit and reflect for 3 months because I'm exhausted, because I've done like 3 shows this year, and like I don't know where I want to take my practice, but like I know that somewhere like Delphina is really going to help me think that through. Write that.
I would
Yeah.
offer a different viewpoint. I mean, I really feel like I don't know if it's more traditional or not, but basically we already know everybody needs a residency, and they need it for different reasons. And it's like, show us your work. Okay, the work is strong. And then we go, we can't have 8 painters from Germany. So boom, 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 mix it all up. Who we got from which country, what they're the mediums, blah, blah, blah. And then that's it. And,
Yeah.
let's be honest, there's an element of luck, but it's also really about the work. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
before the computers, we did slideshows, we didn't even look at resumes, and we just looked at the work. Now you're in submittable, so you can look at it all. But what matters most is the work.
Yeah,
thank
I would also, sorry, Dexter.
No, go ahead. Thanks.
But I would also say that I think for us, and maybe to clarify what I was speaking about earlier, it really is about kind of research. Like if you've done research about our program and you're showing me that you understand what our kind of purpose is and how we support our artists and how that's going to provide something for you, and whether that is kind of, as mentioned, like rest and relaxation, or whether that's, you know, I know that there's a bronze sculptor in Senegal that I want to create a piece of work with, and like those two of those things doesn't mean one is better than the other or more likely to have you accepted. But I do think that when you spend the time in creating a project proposal or a cover letter that like speaks to the experience you want to have and why, that those are the most compelling applications. And I think the more research that artists can do, the more kind of thought process you can put behind about how to craft an individualized cover letter for whichever artists' residencies you're applying to. Because I will say sometimes you'll see more general cover letter that could be fit any number of residency programs versus one that's like really speaking to individual programs is really compelling. And then being able to connect that to the artwork that you're showing us. Because obviously you don't have, you know, 50 art, we don't accept 50 different individual artwork examples. We accept, you know, a set number. So how do you show us what you want to create and emphasize the artwork that you've created in the past to really create that together?
Thank you. Thank you. So coming down to the final, I have a couple of comments and I'm going to let everyone go. I mean, and I don't know if you guys realize this, but it is 2:16 in the morning where I am. So obviously I'm really interested in this conversation. So persistence is something I think is incredibly important. If someone's applying to your residency multiple years in a row, do you recommend they change what they're applying with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Just a
remember,
quick question.
we remember, and we were like, did they change their work? What are they, what's
Okay.
new?
Yeah.
Right, really, really important. And I point that out because one of the artists that is attending my residency this year, this is on the strength of their third application. Right. And so it's something to like, keep in mind for people to know. Persistence does matter, especially when you're dealing with a residency program that has a limited amount of slots, and they all do, right? So it's like, if you're getting hundreds of applications, or in some cases even more, you're never going to be able to select everyone that applies. So persistence absolutely matters. The other thing I'd like to add is that I've had experiences where an artist has applied. I'm not going to say the artist, of course. I've had situations where an artist has applied to my residency and did not get selected. However, I was so moved by their work that I helped them sell work to collectors, even though they never attended my residency. So there's also an opportunity for other benefits of getting your work in front of people, even if they're not necessarily able to select you for the residency. I do believe that there is a benefit of building those relationships and getting that exposure out there. I just say that to keep people inspired, because I think applying to residencies is something that, as an artist, as a creative person who's pursuing residencies, it's part of your job. Like you look at the residencies you'd love to attend. If there are application fees or not, and that's a whole nother conversation we are not going to get into because there's not enough time, but you apply to what you can apply to on an ongoing basis with the hope that you will have the strongest application at some point and you will get into the residencies. Also look for resources where you can find list of artist residency opportunities. I think Ruth just dropped in one such resource. So
It's an amazing nonprofit resource, Alliance, Artist Community Alliance, and you can search like, I'm a painter, I want to paint my pajamas on an island and I want it to be free, and you'll get your list.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So someone said, what's the resource? It's let's see.
Artist Community Alliance, ACA.
Okay, great. So we're 20 minutes after the hour. In the interest of time, we're going to conclude. I really appreciate you all going above and beyond, giving me extra time today, giving everyone extra insight. I would just recommend, someone else also said, check out
Residencies.
Yes. Really, really great. I mean, the information is out there. If you have the wherewithal to look, it's all out there between search engines and social media. we can all find this information. So I hope everyone found this to be rewarding. This will be recorded. It is recorded. It will be on New York Academy of Arts YouTube, so people can find it, then share it. Apply to these residencies. Like, let's make it happen. I love the
Don't give
idea of
up.
opportunities to travel. Don't give up. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And yeah, I think that's it. So on behalf of New York Academy of Art, I want to thank the three of you for your generosity and your time. I want to thank everyone that attended today's session. And I will be seeing you all in your respective cities very, very soon. Good luck and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.